Hi, everybody. My name is Kim Nelson, and I'm the assistant chair over the jewelry design program within the fashion department here at FIT. I'd like to thank you all for attending this panel discussion, and I'd like to thank Rosina Sammy for inviting FIT to participate in this year's Radical Jewelry Makeover event. Today's topics of sustainability and circular design grew out of the conversations that the Radical Jewelry movement, the Radical Jewelry Makeover inspired. Our students really enjoyed it when Rosina and some of her artists came and spoke in our classrooms. It really made a great contribution to our semester this year. During today's discussion, only the panelists and the hosts will have their microphones on. And if you are not a panelist or a host, please turn off your camera. It just makes a less cluttered presentation and easier to keep track of who's who. And so that's it for me for now. I'm going to pass the mic to Rosina so she can begin to moderate the panel discussion.
Thank you, Kim, for that kind introduction. It certainly was a pleasure for us to visit you at FIT. I know we got as much out of it as the students did. Part of the mission at Radical Jewelry Makeover is to educate those coming in the next generation of jewelers. And so it was really an exciting and educational tool for us as well. So let me introduce myself. My name is Rosina Sammy. I'm the founder of The Jewelry Edit. We are an online boutique carrying over 50 plus designers. And our mission is really twofold. One, to go out there and explore and find designers who are as passionate about the environment as we are. So we only carry designers using ethical means of production, and those designers on a journey like we are to learn and discover new ways to make their production more transparent and ethical. Our second mission is really an issue dear to my heart as a woman of color, and that is to elevate the voices of diverse designers. We're here today, as Kim mentioned, because the Jewelry Edit partnered with Radical Jewelry Makeover. And one of the co-founders of Radical Jewelry Makeover is our panelist, Christina Miller, who I will introduce shortly. But what Radical Jewelry Makeover is essentially we call in and get donations of broken and unwanted jewelry, and then we had our designers reimagine it into something new. And it's a remarkable process. It's a great example of circular design. And for those interested, you can see those beautiful creations right now at the Jewelry Library in New York City and online at the Jewelry Edit. But let me jump in now that I've given you a little overview of why we're here and how this came about. Let me introduce our amazing panelists. And I have to say, I was so excited to pull this group together. They are a powerhouse of leaders when it comes to talking about this journey towards sustainability. And we're thrilled to have people from jewelry and fashion shedding light on this topic so that we can learn today. As I mentioned, we have Christina Miller, who is the co-founder of Radical Jewelry Makeover and Ethical Metalsmiths. She's also the founder of her own private consulting firm. She's an expert in the area that everyone knows to go to. And she really specializes in taking small and medium-sized businesses and helping them develop a responsible approach to their jewelry production. We also have Carmen Gamma, who's the director of circular design at Eileen Fisher. And really, after saying that, I think I need to say no more. Clearly a leader in the fashion industry and someone we hope to learn from today as to how the jewelry industry can start to adopt better circular design practices. Next, we have Wendy Yothers, who I'm sure all the students here know. She is a professor at FIT and also a very well-regarded silversmith with pieces in museums around the world, including the Smithsonian. What I love about having Wendy here is that we have a great example of things coming full circle, as one of our jewelry designers, Katie Walker, who participated in Radical Jewelry Makeover, was a student of Wendy's and actually asked me to say a special hello. She learned so much and she was able to put some of that into practice in her Radical Jewelry Makeover transformation. So we love hearing that, and we'll definitely explore more about what's happening from the student side of things with Wendy. And then we have Bliss Lau, who is a well-known jewelry designer, an accomplished jewelry designer. She's also at the forefront in terms of adopting more sustainable practices. I know she's worked with Christina. She's become much more transparent. And, what's beautiful about her designs and her company is that when you're buying from Bliss, you know what you're buying. There's a level of transparency in terms of the materials and the production. So consumers are buying there with confidence. They're not only getting a beautiful creation, they're getting that level of transparency. And I think that's part of what our discussion is about today, is how we as a jewelry community can move in that direction. But let's jump in and start. Thank you for all of you who joined us on your lunch break. I see we have a great I look forward to questions at the end also. We are eager to make this, a very engaging discussion. Now I'll start with this idea that, when I put out this panel, I received a surprising number of questions as to what exactly circular design means. And I think we know a little bit in theory about how, you want to limit the use of extraction of resources. We want to engage more in reuse of materials. But what does that really look like when it comes to the jewelry industry? And so I'd love, Christina, I hope you don't mind me passing the mic to you first, to share a little bit about what circular design means for jewelers.
Yeah, hi. Thanks so much, Rosina and FIT for hosting. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And it's also, I just have to say, it's so exciting that you all participated in a radical jewelry makeover. It's kind of a dream come true to see the project emerge in such an exciting way in New York City. So thank you all for taking on the challenge to explore the way RJM does that. So in a way, if we look through the lens of radical jewelry makeover to understand circularity, the majority of material that's donated to the project really represents that take, make, waste reality that is the complete opposite of circularity. So by take, I mean, you take materials from the earth, you then transform them in such a way that they become almost unrecyclable, because they are the pot metals, meaning these low melting metals, are all mushed together into one alloy. They're often plated, there's glue, there's plastic, there's such an explosion of material that goes into the making element. And then on the waste side, these pieces aren't designed to last. They are part of a fast fashion cycle of jewelry. And so they're fragile. The plating breaks and wears off. If the plating isn't on the ear wire anymore, you have itchy ears, or if it comes off of the ring that you're wearing, then you'll get rashes sometimes from the material. So often the jewelry ends up in the trash. It gets thrown away at the end of the fashion cycle, and it doesn't have a good pathway to being recycled. We're really lucky on the kind of fine, what we would consider fine jewelry materials like gold and silver and platinum, in the sense that those materials, if they are making their way to the trash can, that's kind of an anomaly, right? It's a weird reality if they're making their way to the trash. So we're already kind of in fine jewelry, have this opportunity for recycling the material and reusing it again and again. So RJM gets donations of both, and this fast fashion jewelry as well as fine. And the artists are challenged, in that moment in time to learn, can I do something with this fast fashion jewelry? Can't I? How do I incorporate those designs that already exist and kind of make them my own? Versus, if it's made out of precious metals, I can melt that thing down and turn it wholly into something of my own unique vision. So that's just like skimming the surface, letting the project educate us about circularity.
Got it. And that's very helpful. I think what I want to circle back to later is ideas around how, as an industry, we can maybe move away from fast fashion, which is so hard to get into that circle that we are looking to do. But I'd love to jump to Carmen right now, because clearly at the forefront of circular design and fashion. And I saw, congratulations, I saw Eileen Fisher was just named today as the #1 resale site by ThreadUp. So you guys are doing amazing work with your Renew program. Can you share a little bit more about what circular design looks like for you?
Yes, well, thank you so much, Rosina, for having me on FIT. I'm really excited to be able to share this stage with fellows from this industry, which is jewelry. I'm not knowledgeable at all into that world, but I think a lot of, things that we are doing internally in the clothing industry can be passed on for other industries as well, because we also have a lot to learn from other industries, like the plastics, the paper industry, right? So, yes, circular design. For what does that mean for us internally? It's mostly very high level, very simple. Try to capture as many garments that we have put into our customers' closet, right, that they no longer want. Because we want to do something. We want to be responsible for all of the resources that we have extracted from the planet to make beautiful new clothing, right? So we want to capture that, extend the life cycle as much as we can, either by reselling them or using them as raw materials to create new garments. And how we've been doing that is that we started a take back program in 2009, where we actually been collecting over 1.8 million garments since then. I think it's gonna hit
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. I think it's gonna hit to 2 million garments in November, more or less. But yeah, so basically for us, it's not just about looking at the supply chain on how we are, what are the materials that we are using, what are the dyes, what are the chemicals. It's also been responsible for that we put back, right? So we only take back Eileen Fisher garments, right? We give them a $5 coupon for every garment that we get. It can be like literally a sock, just a single sock with a hole, or it can be like a brand new cashmere sweater that the customer never wore, right? We just take back everything. And then we do a couple things with them. We either resell them at the ones that they're in good condition, or we use the other ones for different solutions. But that's like in high level of what we do internally. But like circularity for us, we're still trying to really understand the huge level of work that it takes for a company to become circular, because we're not truly circular internally, right? It requires the whole company to be part of it. It requires a lot of partnerships with, other companies. So we are still trying to make sense of it, but we've been in the forefront, for a couple years now on that space.
And I want to jump to Bliss in a minute to ask about how she's implemented a similar program through her company. But before we jump to that, Carmen, if you could tell us maybe what has been your biggest challenge? And I know there have been many, but maybe name one of your biggest challenges in implementing and adopting the program.
I mean, I think our biggest challenge is well, there's so many. But the biggest challenge that we are facing right now, which I can speak of, is we started the Take Back program very organically, right? A lot of the things that happen at Eileen Fisher really just starts on a lower level, right? So we started just collecting the garments from our internal employees, right? We said, like, anyone who has an Eileen Fisher garment, can you return it? We did a pilot. We put it on our local store in Irvington, New York, and we saw the success of it. Then we said, like, oh, okay, our customers love it. What's next, right? So for us, it's always baby steps, right? So now, we've been over 10 years now. One of our biggest challenges that we're seeing is that we receive about 20,000 garments a month. That's a lot, right? But one of our biggest challenges is that we are seeing less and less good quality garments coming back to us, because there's a lot more resale platforms out there that can actually offer bigger rewards for our Eileen Fisher garments to our customers, right? So one of the biggest challenges that we're facing is like, what is the next generations of rewards that we should be offering our customer in order for us to be capturing that product? Because we know that if we get that product, regardless of the level of damage or if it's in good condition, we will be responsible for it. We will find a responsible solution for it. So that's one of the challenges that we're seeing right now.
Great. And I definitely will be asking Wendy about the next generation because she's got such insight into that. But first, let's jump to Bliss, because I know you have carefully crafted a program around renewing and taking back some of your pieces. But why don't you give us a little bit of a window into your company and how it works?
Hi, yeah, thank you for having me. It's so nice to be here with FIT. Yeah, so my collection at some point, I guess to give you a preface, I'm from Honolulu, and growing up in an island culture, like you're really aware of every material and everything that passes through your world because you're already in sort of a world of limited resources. So it's always been something that I've thought about. And a lot of people just have old jewelry sitting around in their closet that they're not wearing anymore. And I am very anti-waste, and I love working, like kind of living off the fat of the land. What do I have to work with? And I actually think that circularity and the way that we do it is a really, really fun design exploration, because I created this program, we call it Renew. Basically, it's people will come in, and I have had people come in and just like drop a pile of jewelry on my table. And I have a series of pieces that can fit just about any stone. So I designed, a necklace, an earring, a bracelet, a ring, several different rings that you can come in and you have like lots of different mismatched stones, or even like this ring, if you can see it. This was the first earring I ever got as a child from my grandmother, a diamond. And then when I graduated high school, of course, I like lost one of them, didn't know what to do with it. And then when she passed, I received another diamond. And so I made myself this ring. And then she had all of these chains that weren't my style, and I recycled the chains. And so when my clients will come in and do this, I will offer them a variety of my designs, and then we'll take back all of their pieces. We extract all of the stones, we present it to them, and I'll either design a specific new concept around it, or they'll use one of my existing styles. And, one of the things that we found, I worked with Christina on this idea, is like, how do you communicate that, right? So we first called it jewelry circularity. Nobody knew what that was. And so that's where we came up with the idea of Renew. How can we make it as simple as possible? How can we make this fun? So I basically I gamified it. And if you go onto my website, you can take our quiz, and it asks you different questions. I have a couple of them here just to read them off to you, because in order for me to simultaneously create my Renew products and educate my customers as to why they want to do this, I needed them to kind of join in with me on ethical alignments. And so the questions they were asking, one of them is like, how do you move through the world, right? So that asks like, are you clumsy? Are you self-aware? So we start with body. And then we moved on to, what are you interested in? The answers being, connecting to my history, numerology, ancient history and cultures, even none of the above. And then what's your philosophy on sustainability? In my company, we generally don't use the word sustainability because you can't replant a diamond into the earth and make it grow. So we prefer to use the word conscious, but for the purpose of our circularity and our Renew project, it is the term that people understand. And so, you can talk about what that means to you. And then we ask, what does it mean to renew something? And we actually get the story from people, like what that jewelry meant to them in their life. And that's connected into like the deeper meaning of what it is to make jewelry in general. And it's been very successful. We've had people from all ages come in and do this. And some people even, I encourage them, if they're even just buying a regular engagement ring, if they want to, we credit them back for all of their meltdown of the gold. So we even encourage like new clients, bring in your old jewelry and we'll recycle it back into the world for you, and we'll give you credit. And that program is also connected to this project.
That's amazing. And it's nice to see that you have that interaction with consumers where they're understanding it. And I think that's a really important piece when we're discussing any of this. It's like, how can we engage people to understand and get behind the concept? And I think, Wendy, you're going to be able to hopefully give us some insight into the next generation and Gen Z, people who we are very excited about, because I think we see there a real opportunity for this movement to grow.
We're so uniquely positioned at FIT to forward this concept, we have all the students are certainly fashion conscious, and in virtually all the majors, sustainability is something that is discussed, and they understand how much indigo it takes to make cotton, and I teach them analogous information, like the amount of waste rock that's required to make a single, that's generated to make a single diamond ring. But that's the most important part, I think, is Bliss's approach, which I have independently, and I'm so glad I have a sister who's doing the same thing. I connect people with why they love jewelry. Where was where does their passion come from? They're we have a wonderful cross section of ethnicities, and so we use the stories behind our jewelry to connect us. We talk about how a material that might be extremely valuable in China is not so valuable in another part of the world. It doesn't have the same cultural contexts, and that leads us toward perceived value. And then as the design, I have a two-pronged approach. One of them is when they choose a material, we have units on how it's derived, the historical context of it. Is it appropriate to use it in the way that they want to use it? How can it be ethically used? Is there an ethical question about any part of it, about its waste, or about its, for instance, its origins? Are you going to buy a ruby from Myanmar? Are you going to buy a lapis from Afghanistan? Where are you going to get your emeralds? And at what point is this thing something you don't want to touch ethically? So,
And what
school is where you learn how to learn for the rest of your life. So we set them, they're open and eager. They have a passion about jewelry. That's why they're in our program. We have a wonderful basic class that crosses all the disciplines. And I find that they're extremely passionate, and they bring what they have learned in marketing and business and illustration and science. And when we all sit together, we see how we are the same and how we can also use our knowledge to create a better way. The most important thing I teach is that they're the masters of the universe. They're the ones who are going to create the future. And of course, as they make their way at first, they're going to be facing an establishment. And I'm saying, look, if you design a piece that includes alternative materials, I want you to design its past, its present, and its future. And if you can do this and express it eloquently, it's probably going to find its way into the mainstream, especially if you're designing something.
Yeah, it's so great to see and confirm that there's an appetite for that amongst the next generation of jewelry designers, because that's what we want to hear. But, I want to go back to you, Carmen and Christina, because, we see there's an appetite for it, but there are a lot of barriers towards it. One obvious one is just financial, in terms of the added cost that sometimes will come about, I know, in jewelry, if, for example, you're going to use fair mined gold or tap into resources that have a more transparent production line. So maybe we'll start with you, Carmen. What are some of the barriers you face? And I know one obvious one would be the cost, and then educating your consumers about potential, costs involved in that piece.
Yeah, I mean, our renew program is a profitable business, right? Our take back program. The part that we're still trying to make sense financially and business model wise is the damage inventory, right? We have a couple of solutions for damage inventory. We have our Waste No More program, which we make like beautiful wall felted materials, right? From our damaged garments. We have a huge felting machine. Then we also have the repair program, and then we have a remanufacturing collection. So for that, we're like really trying to make sense of it. But as of right now, I guess one of our also biggest barriers is that what to do with all of those garments that like in the jewelry world is like they have a lot of blended materials, you know because there's not a lot of solution for them, right?
Yes.
So it's a cost that we are incurring to actually, unfortunately, we have to downcycle a lot of these garments, right? Because there's not a lot of solutions. So that also the biggest one is, and one of the reasons why Eileen Fisher is one of the unique companies who are doing these initiatives, is it requires a lot of infrastructure to do a take back program in-house. You know, you require a lot of knowledge and expertise to do it, and it's like a huge financial, it's like a big investment. For us, it works because of our business model. But throughout my years here at Eileen Fisher, I've been like, touring and showing our operations to a lot of different companies and different industries. And, it just doesn't make sense for a lot of companies to do. Seeing a lot of companies that they're starting to offer these type of solutions for companies not to do it in-house, but to actually pay it as a service, right? So that's kind of like one of the barriers for more companies to do it, but we're seeing a solution. So I think the same could happen on the jewelry industry. If you're a jewelry brand and you don't have the financial means to do your whole take back program in-house, there should be like service companies that actually offer these for them to be able to incorporate circularity on their business models.
Yeah, so that's a great idea. And Christina, why don't you jump in here with what are some of the barriers in the jewelry industry to making something like this happen? And also, what's the appetite in the jewelry industry towards moving towards more of a circular design? And I know it's hard when I say jewelry industry because there's a big difference between fashion and the fast fashion, but maybe shed some light for us.
Before I forget it, I wanted to draw a comparison directly to what Carmen was just saying. So, what doesn't exist is with the kind of fashion jewelry that I was describing that's made out of all these mixed up materials, turned into one item. We don't have good recycling systems for that. So that in a way is what Carmen was describing, like there needs to be resources developed. One is, should we be altering our design strategies from the outset for that fast fashion jewelry, first of all? Then, as it's still making its way into the supply chain, how do we process it effectively so it doesn't end up in the landfill and those materials can be reclaimed? That's a barrier right now because it doesn't exist, and there is still the appetite for fast fashion jewelry, right? So we have kind of two challenges in that front. When it comes to fine materials, having a really good circular system means you are well aware of and involved in responsible mining practices, for one. It doesn't mean you forget about that because the majority of gold, for example, that's already on the surface of the earth is enough to fill 4 Olympic-sized swimming pools with gold, right? But it's all owned. It's owned by banks, it's owned by individuals. Believe it or not, 2 of those Olympic-sized swimming pools filled with gold are jewelry in people's jewelry boxes and in their vaults where they keep them, right?
As a South Asian, I can say yes. We are very happy to own a lot of gold, and that's probably not going to change. So, yes.
Yeah, so there are cultural traditions there. So just sort of kind of keeping in mind, how those materials flow. So, but where we're very different in a way from fashion is that precious metals refining, which is that reclamation process, has always existed with precious metals. So, if Bliss wants to, with her own local manufacturers in New York, do sort of micro processing of that customer's vintage jewelry, she can. If instead, she adopts a different kind of model for recycling that material, she could gather it over time and send it to a refiner who will process that metal, remove the impurities, and then give her access to fresh metal that is easy for her to work with her designs and her manufacturing processes. So the refining system is well established globally, right? That is not, when it comes to those metals for jewelers, it's not a challenge. How, So there are also large brands who have said, we are only going to work with recycled metals, for instance. So Pandora, for example, is one of the largest, most well-known jewelry brands who has made a claim like that. And, they also teeter on the edge of, not quite fast fashion, but it's generally more affordable jewelry line.
Mass
Um,
produced.
and they received a lot of controversy from folks that are very determined in restructuring the way metals are mined, in the way that they're processed, in the way that our industry benefits the people at the very beginning of the supply chain. So, and I'm sure, based on what I've been hearing lately, they might actually be having a hard time getting all of the recycled content they need for their production because folks aren't selling their gold right now. And kind of the last barrier, I think, in that circularity that I want to point out that I started with at the beginning is that all of these materials are continuing to be mined regardless of recycling programs. And so taking well into consideration the mining practices is absolutely paramount, and it actually offers one of the greatest opportunities for the jewelry industry to have a positive impact. So it's that we very much believe in kind of this engage to improve mentality where, look, miners don't want to be poisoning themselves. They want to live a long life. They want to be earning a living wage. Often it's the best paying job available where they are. So why would we, and how dare we in a way say like, nope, boycotting that person's opportunity to exist. So it's a very fine line to tread in that, and sort of people find their way kind of in the spectrum of what they want to ultimately support and participate in.
Yeah, you've touched on a really important point that I think is now hopefully growing more interest and momentum around, which is the idea of fair mined gold or fair trade gold. And I don't think, I always joke, having been talking about this for a little while now, that Leonardo DiCaprio just needs to make a movie about gold, and then everyone may now come to understand the difference. Just 'cause the way Conflict Diamonds has received so much attention following his movie. I don't know, someone write a script and get it to him. But the idea of fair mine gold, I think, is one way to move this conversation forward. And from what I recall, I think it's less than 6% of the gold
Right.
that's out there right now. So it's a very small, element, and it's also going to be at least 15% more of the at the end price, right, of what you're buying. I know, Bliss, you work with some Fairmine Gold, or maybe tell us a little bit about that. I think not all of your pieces are made using Fairmine Gold. So how do you make that distinction? Like, do you go in and say, you know what, I'm just going to use Fairmine Gold? All my customers just need to understand that they're paying more, and maybe they'll value that because they know where the gold is coming from and they feel good about that. That's an incentive for them. Or are you finding some pushback? Do customers care? I think it would be so helpful to hear about the response.
Yeah, when I got my Fairmine Gold license, I was like, perfect. I'm gonna just offer the option, and I have a very long-winded way I explain it because it's such an important thing to educate my clients on. No success. Like, I think I had one person in the first few months, and recently I had one more, and now I've realized that they are it's so complicated for people outside of our industry to understand all of these different elements, and ultimately, like, they feel really good about knowing that, like, we are a conscious designer and they're buying something that with certified recycled gold, that they don't necessarily, unless the client is like deeply connected to human rights and appreciates what it means for Fairmine Gold to be Fairmine Gold, it just doesn't land when you give them the option. So right now, I have not made a lot of pieces out of Fairmine, just a few. So right now I'm developing a collection exclusively for the Fairmine Gold project, and that's something that I'm just going to be doing and not offering any other options. Other designer friends of mine just don't even give the clients the option. I think it just kind of depends on how you're going to manage your business and what kind of price point you want. Also, there's another tier to this, is that it's not like I can just decide that I'm going to make anything out of Fairmine Gold. I have 8 factories throughout the country. Not all of them are Fairmine licensed. I can't make a lot of my styles in Fairmine Gold if I wanted to. So I can't on a blanket level offer that to everyone. All of the factories I work with have certified recycled gold, but very few of them do have the Fairmine. And so there's other sort of elements to how you manufacture the components to making those choices as well.
It's so interesting because then you see all of these challenges that come up. It's not as easy to say, let's just use this and create a collection. I think there also needs to be, it just highlights how much education needs to happen around the mining of gold. And I know as part of a Radical Jewelry Makeover, we screened an Amazon Aid Foundation documentary, River of Gold. Those of you who haven't seen it, which is a great sort of insight into illicit gold mining and the dangers for these illicit gold mines and how it's destroying the Amazon rainforest. Wendy, maybe you can tell us, in your students and the employers who are coming to FIT, I know all your students are in demand from coming out of your program. Is there any discussion around Fairmine Gold? Is that something either from the employer side or from your side is part of the conversation?
From my side, I teach it in absolutely every class, and I teach in the distinction, and I make sure that they understand the difference between Fairmine Gold and dirty gold and all the gradations between. That's huge, and it's eye-opening. I also show them images of artisanal mining and then large industrial mining. Those mines are visible from outer space. They're huge. Those huge excavations. But I think really the place where we can move the needle the most is in inception of design, saying what's going to happen to this. How can we design longevity or circularity into the thoughts? Let's think about how we can do that. There was an interesting project I went to the International Federation of Fashion Institutes of Technology conference in Nottingham a couple of weeks ago. And one of the most interesting projects, of course, had to do with textiles. And the workshop was all of the design had to be adapted. You could not cut anything except length. So that meant there were no snippets on the floor. You had to imagine design crafted and working from only length, right? And the great thing about that was students were challenged with communicating with the mill. How narrow can we make these? How long can we make these? They had to face some facts and rethink facts that they thought were inviolable. For instance, fabric grain. How do you make it hang right if you can't cut it on a bias? That sort of thing. So honestly, that kind of design thinking is a good project. It's a very good thing to have people have in their wheelhouse, something they can do, doing beautiful work, but designing sustainability into the aesthetic at the very, very beginning, that it's instead of as a pious afterthought, right? So if you're doing it from the beginning, it can be beautiful. You'll solve those problems front-ended. So nobody ever sees that, how the sausage is made. They don't see that.
Right.
They see this.
So I think the intent.
This wonderful, desirable product that just happens to be circular and sustainable and wonderful.
Yeah, well, no, that's great. And I think that intention of design is so important. But Carmen, I want to circle back, and I know time is ticking away. We want to have some questions. Before we jump to maybe the latter questions I have, which will be quite positive, I want to ask you another challenging question, which is some people see this as a little bit of a niche audience. Like we're not there yet. So maybe Eileen Fisher is catering to a certain smaller segment, which as a brand sometimes isn't appealing because you're trying to sell as much as possible. So how would you push back against that idea? So, because for example, it was great to hear Bliss say like none of her customers really registered the concept of Fairmine Gold. So what is the impetus for people to go out there and say, I want to adopt circular design. I want to be using traceable gemstones or Fairmine Gold. How have you combated that challenge?
Well, if anything, our take back program has made our customers' loyalty stronger. Eileen Fisher's mission and values are all about like really caring for the planet and people, right? Since she started her brand, like she started with these like high quality materials, very simple design, system dressing. So a lot of these garments are that we get back that they're like 30-year-old, they're still wearable and like, design wise, they're still good. So Eileen Fisher has a very core loyal customer. When we started our take back program, we didn't know how she was going to react, right? She loved it. She keeps bringing back the garments, and the fact that we are responsible and we are telling the story out there, we're telling her what we're doing with the garments. That's one of the reasons that as of right now, even if we give a $5 coupon, she's coming to us, right? No, we still have the challenge of like, we're losing slowly but steady, but she's still coming to us. So if anything, having becoming circular and having a take back program, it's been very beneficial to our brand.
Right. And I know there were a few questions for you in the chat that I want to get to, but
Yes.
Christina, maybe you can shed some light on how, as jewelers, we can start to think about ways to adopt it and to combat the challenge that Bliss was alluding to, because that's a little disheartening, right? It's an expensive, time-consuming process to try to adopt some of these practices. So how do we combat the challenge? And maybe you can suggest like a layered approach, like for a lot of emerging designers out there, what are baby steps we can sort of start to take to show that we are making change?
Yeah, I love Bliss's frankness about what she's experienced. And so, just on the fair mind front, it suits certain business models well and other business models less well. So depending on who you're manufacturing with, depending on how you set up your whole structure, it can be more or less accessible. I mean, I know some designers for whom they only work with Fairmine Gold. So they've retooled their entire production strategy just for that. For Bliss, her desire and the way that she wants to communicate with her customers, this kind of custom approach where they're bringing their old unwanted jewelry to be given a new life, is a really special relationship. So when you compare that to, what Carmen is saying about the Eileen Fisher strategy, this is how you create customers for long-term strategy. It's beautiful. And like it's not, in this case, they're saying this isn't doing any good sitting in my jewelry box. I would love to have it refreshed with a new life. So one thing that's interesting, if you're just starting out, let's say you're getting your first custom, wedding ring project. Let's say you're also a fabricator, right? So you're not necessarily relying on a casting house, for example, to make your jewelry. You are set essentially to work with whatever material you want to work with, because you can use a customer's old gold, you can test it yourself, you can do sort of minimal refining in-house to reuse it, or you could buy a certain amount of Fairmine Gold. You can get your customer to prepay to put their deposit down so that you can afford that material, and then you have this process where you're just getting started. As you add layers of complexity to your manufacturing or your the techniques that you use, the number of different styles you offer, all that kind of stuff, you exponentially grow the complexities, which on one hand is really good. You can offer a ton of variety. You get to test out, different designs and see which ones are most interesting to people, etc. So there's always sort of the give and take across the spectrum. I have seen people put ads in the newspaper asking to buy people's old jewelry, because they really don't know what to do with it. So radical jewelry makeover is one solution, but for a young designer who hasn't worked with gold before and wants to try, that's one thing that I've seen people do before. Could go on.
There's a lot of pressure. Like, I love these ideas, and I think it's definitely something that young designers need to start thinking about as the folks who are now moving forward. But how do you feel about heritage brands and what they've done? Because sometimes it needs to come from the top and to trickle down where we see they're doing they've got the budgets to do the education that we can then jump on, right? And so I haven't seen a lot of talk around Fairmine Gold at this point when it comes to heritage brands. I know Human Rights Watch did a report recently, and there wasn't a lot of transparency amongst some of the major players in this area. Again, do you think that the industry wants to change?
I can handle that. And
Okay.
the answer is no. I think they have a lot invested in doing things the way they've always done them. And one of the biggest problems we have, or one of the biggest challenges we have as educators, is saying the scariest thing you'll ever hear is that we've always done it that way. When you hear it in a boardroom, when you hear it in any context, think about that. You should analyze and interrogate that process and move forward. That's absolutely true. Tiffany and Company is the has a, I think, a strong rating, but they're the only ones, and that's because they get their diamonds in Utah, or their gold in Utah, and their diamonds from Yellowknife. They have a clear supply chain, and the rest of it's recycled. But Harry Winston wouldn't play,
Yep.
and neither
Harry
they
Winston,
refused to fill out the survey and be scrutinised. Go away.
absolutely, as did I think Rolex, Mikimoto, but Tiffany did do was fair at least, or even perhaps a little
They
better
got
than that.
strong, but they didn't get excellent. Yeah.
Right. Well, I think now is a good time to maybe take a few questions. And I know we're mainly handling that through the chat. So I don't know if Joe can help with this, or should we just try and take a few questions?
Well,
And I guess the
it
jewelry.
looks like there haven't been really questions in the chat. What we can do is have the participants raise their hands, and then I will
Sure,
unmute them in the order. I think that's the easiest thing to do.
that sounds good. So if anyone has a question, I'd love you to raise your hand, and then Joe can unmute you.
Rosina, I wanted to answer one of the questions that was directly to me. It's saying,
Okay, sure.
Is Carmen saying that resale stores are capturing Eileen Fisher garments for resale? Yes. So basically, what our customers can do, they can return any of their Eileen Fisher garments to any of our Eileen Fisher stores, or they can send it directly to our two warehouses. So that was just an easy. And then yes, so what we do with them is we clean them, we resell the good ones, and the other ones we have a lot of other solutions for it.
Do we have anyone else raising their hand, Joe, or shall I jump to the questions in the chat?
No, I don't see any.
Okay, well, I have a
Raised hands.
question. I have a question from the Jewelry Library, which I will ask. And as I mentioned earlier, they have curated and are hosting Radical Jewelry Makeover for us here in New York. And the question from them was, how do you educate your customers about being more conscientious buyers? And I think we have discussed that a little bit, but I think what's interesting is that those who are coming to Radical Jewelry Makeover and looking at these beautiful pieces that have been created are understanding the story, and perhaps through that are seeing the value of what they're buying. But, generally, how do we go about that education? Christina, do you want to share something with us? Or maybe Carmen, you can help us learn from you, which is part of this whole panel. How have you gone about it in fashion?
I mean, for us, it's all about transparency, right? It's really just sharing our processes, talking to other companies, really just being very loud about our take back program. We're not, we have only actually done two main campaigns about asking our customers to return their garments to us, right? Because we don't have a lot of bandwidth to take more than what we're getting right now, right? But even with those just two call outs, and in between, we're just sharing what we do with them, in the form of resale. We have the two Renew standing stores, we do pop ins, we do We do a lot of public speaking. We have store engagement events. So a lot of these is just constantly be talking to our customer about how we're doing these things and why are we doing it. That's the most important stuff.
And Bliss, have you found a similar approach in terms of your marketing?
Yeah, I think that like when it comes to the Fairmind, like pushing Fairmind Gold, which is something I'm really interested in doing, I understand that's kind of off subject since it's not exactly circularity, but I do think it's really important for people just to think about it. Like, wait, where did I even know where the gold came from that other ring that I bought? And how do you do that? Like I have, we do Instagram stories and we publish things, and on my website we have, all about our sourcing. But I'm actually right now working on a project with a social celebrity, and she has 500,000 followers, and then we have paired with a publication, and we're literally like having videos made of the entire process of how we do it, and they will publish a video online, and the videos that they've had have had millions of views. And I think that like this is something that I feel like it's my responsibility to get it out there to as many eyeballs as possible, just for the mission of Fairmind. Whether or not it benefits my business is insignificant. Like the goal is for more people to just ask that question, and the minute that they start asking that question, then we've already had a win. And then they can ultimately decide, like, do you choose people or planet? What does that mean? Like, what is your stance on environment? Like, is invading the earth always a problem to you, or do you want it to recycle? And all of those questions are really big questions, and I think like that's step one in people really learning and phasing into what this all means.
Well, I love that, and I love that I think we've got about 5 minutes left, and please, anyone raise their hand if they do have a question. But as I mentioned, I do want to end on a positive note. This panel today is also being recorded, so it will be circulated to others who are interested in this area and want to hopefully come away inspired. That's the goal here. It is to energize people to make change and real change. I think everyone goes to a lot of panels where they just talk about ideas. We want really people to be able to start to make change, whether it's as a consumer or as a designer. So I'd love it if everyone could give us a little takeaway to end from this panel on how people in their real life, whether as a consumer or a designer, can start to implement change. Christina, why don't you start?
For me, one of the most inspiring things is the simple act of asking questions, where, it is a very powerful and moving thing. The next time you feel like you're making a purchase of finished jewelry as a consumer, or you're making a purchase as a designer looking for your next bit of material, to ask where the material comes from. How did it get here? Who is benefiting along the way? How do you know? How do you measure those things? Having worked with Bliss, you do so with a smile. You ask those questions from a point of curiosity, from a point of, I want to know this information, but I also want to support your exploration of it. And you're helping me find what I need, from what I'm asking. And it's those questions, like, it's so simple, but it's those questions that create a ripple effect movement. And because for the most part, the sourcing of jewelry materials is so far from view, it's paramount that we ask, because the more we can bring that into our field of vision in the decisions that we make, the more responsible that we can be. I think that's optimistic.
I like optimism. I think that's a good thing. And I think you're absolutely right. As at the Jewelry Edit, we are getting more questions through our online website about the gold and about where it's from, about transparency. So it is so positive to see that people are getting more educated about that. Carmen, what would your takeaway be, either for consumers or as for fashion designers or jewelry designers coming up?
It was kind of like like to end with like a consumer point of view. I'm a consumer, and I know that, sometimes sustainable fashion, sustainable, jewelry might not be at everybody's, like, not everybody might be able to afford it. So it's very easy for us on this side to say, like, you have to support sustainable brands, you have to buy only from ethical. I think the most important thing for people, consumers, to really ask is like, do I really need it? Right? Is it like a one-time purchase? How long is this gonna last in my wardrobe? But I'm a secondhand advocate, so I always encourage, either in jewelry or like, on the garment industry, like just support secondhand, because that's the best thing that you can do. Just continue to extend the life cycle of things that we already have in our hands. So that's kind of like on the note that I always like ending.
Great. Thank you, Carmen. And Wendy, how about yourself?
I'm so excited about hearing the several pronged approach. I've been studying how cultures throughout the last several hundred years have dealt with recycling and waste, and I could tell you some wonderful stories about it. But I think that what we've discovered in my lifetime is that the best way to um, get rid of the problem of waste is not to generate it. So I'm excited about teaching students to think about that and to design in a product that will have wonderful longevity. I'm also excited in educating consumers and students so that as they move forward, that'll be in their wheelhouse, and they'll have a multifaceted approach to their business, let's say, or their consuming, or their manufacturing aspects, or their marketing even. I think there's a whole new niche really of there, there's always been a huge recycled parts industry in New York City, buying bits of old jewelry that get repurposed. But this is even more interesting, I think, how to take those and give them a new cultural context, and to create perceived value, redefine perceived value through design and ingenuity rather than materials only.
Right. Well, I love that. And so we're learning to ask more questions, to go out and think about where we're buying from, secondhand buying. And I love Wendy's like thoughtful design inception. So starting at the beginning of the process and this next generation kind of, approaching jewelry design with that mindset. And so Bliss, give us something else positive to walk away with.
I mean, to reiterate everything everyone said, like I agree with all of you, and I think that, what's in your closet, let's start with what's in your closet. And I wouldn't have, I know, speaking from my own experience, like I wouldn't normally have had the means to buy fine jewelry at a younger age. So it isn't really fair to say go out and support conscious, but I think that, what about just learning about all the brands that are conscious, and like we all have goals, and making goals to do that, and then getting something recycled, getting something secondhand. I think that all of those things are really, really good. And the more you know, the more power you have. And that's enough for me.
Yeah, I think that's great. Knowledge is always power. And I think hopefully as we have more of these sorts of conversations, as people continue to get inspired, and I loved some of the comments about how people were inspired, including Tracy Blake, who's a designer for the Jewelry Edit, just inspiring people, getting people to think more about it, having more designers out there educating and approaching jewelry in this way. I think also hopefully we'll have more accessible lines when it comes to ethically made jewelry, which is a topic that all of you just touched upon, which it is a challenge, and I think it can be off-putting to some people when you're like, well, you have to buy conscious, or you're somehow letting society down if you're not doing that. I mean, we're all having to start with these baby steps and figuring out ways. But thank you all for being here. I really, really appreciate it. I think there are some great resources that Christina and other folks have put in the chat. So thank you. Thank you so much. And unless there's any other questions, Joe, I think that's a great positive note to end on.
That's it. All right. Thanks,
Great.
everyone.
Thank you so much, FIT. Thank you, Kim, for hosting this and collaborating with us and with Radical Jewelry Makeover. Anyone who's interested, and hopefully all of you are, having come to this discussion, please, as I said, go visit the jewelry library while you still can. It's just another couple of days to go and see these amazing recycled pieces. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rosina.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.